Hey, everybody. Today, I'm going to walk us through the exercise in lesson 3, working with selections in Photoshop Classroom in a Book 2024. The selections are one of the most powerful tools that Photoshop has, and they just keep getting smarter. So let's get into it. First thing, I'm going to open Photoshop. And in order to do that, I'm going to press Option Command Shift and hold those keys down as I click to open Photoshop. What that will do is reset the Photoshop settings so that we're all working on the same look. Sometimes you might rearrange your windows in Photoshop, and resetting the preferences, resetting the settings will clear all of that out and bring it back to a default look. So I'll go ahead and make this bigger on my screen. And on my computer, I'll open the file o3start.psd, which you will download from Blackboard. All right, here we go. Our first step when we open any Photoshop file is to take the background and copy it. And we'll rename that folder Working. This leaves us an untouched version of our original image so that we can always have it. The selection tools are the first tools that we'll use. And in order to find those, we'll click and hold on the fourth tile down here on the left-hand side in the Tools menu. And I'll select the Magic Wand tool. The keyboard shortcut for the Magic Wand is the W key on your keyboard. The Magic Wand selects pixels that are a specific color range. It's mostly helpful when you have a solid color that you want to select. So I'll go ahead and click right here on the background of this sand dollar image, and it's now selected all of those red pixels. If I needed to select a different range or more or less of a color, I would change the tolerance up here. So for example, if I reduce that tolerance to say 2, reducing again the range of colors that the Magic Wand will select, I click it. Well, actually this red is only one color, right? Let's see, let's try it over here on this gold one. You could see how it's only selecting a very narrow range of colors. And I'll try 32 again and get on the gold, and it selects a much larger area. So with a tolerance of 32, I can click on the red background around this sand dollar and select that red background. But what we really want here is the shell. And so I can just put this Magic Wand then over the shell and click it. Oh, but that tolerance isn't going to work there. Some parts are selected, some parts are not. So you can see that the colors are, there's a wider range of colors than that tolerance of 32. So let's go ahead and deselect that. Now let's try using the quick selection tool. So we'll come up here to the Magic Wand again and hold it down to choose the quick selection tool. This one, you just drag it within a subject and it selects what it thinks it should select. It's a more aware tool than the Magic Wand tool is. You can also choose Enhance Edges when you use this tool. So I'll go ahead and deselect it and reselect. Let's zoom in some. All right, I'm going to deselect it again and uncheck Enhance Edge. Let's see here on, might be a little jaggy. All right, deselect. Yeah, it's smoothed it out a little bit, right? It's got a little more accurate edge detection there. And so now this quick selection tool, because the sand dollar is such a simple shape, quick selection is smart enough to select it pretty well in this step. And now the selected sand dollar has a move box around it. You can see the cursor's changed a little bit too. I'll click and hold to drag that sand dollar up into this circle, and that looks great. I can click deselect here. I can press Command D on the keyboard to deselect it, or I can say select, deselect. Now I'll choose File, Save As. I'll go ahead and put this on my desktop and call it O03 Working. And go ahead and put my last name in there. so I can make sure that the instructor knows who I am when I submit my work. Save it as a Photoshop file and click Save. Okie dokie. Another selection tool is the Object Selection tool, which is this one on top of the selection tool stack. And what this one allows you to do, let's scroll down here to this coral, and I'll press Command++. It automatically selects the object. What we can do is take this Object Selection tool and just drag it over anything, and it will select that object. Now that we've got that coral selected, I'm going to press Command ---- again and spacebar to drag this out of the way. I have to zoom out one more time, Command -. Now I can see area B here. What's happening where you see all of these elements lighting up as I scroll by them? This is what the Object Selection tool is noticing now. If I just wanted to get this shell, I could just drag my Object Selection tool over it and it would select just the shell. You can see that how the ants appeared on the shell. So I'll select the coral again. Now that I have the coral selected, I'll come over to my Tools menu and click on the Move tool again. Click and drag this up here to the area B. And that actually looks a little small to me. I want to transform this, and by moving my cursor over to one of the corners, you can see it changed into a different kind of arrow. And so I want to click and drag that to make it a little bigger, to keep the coral proportional to how it is now in the height and width. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and just make it a little bigger. Click Done. I'll press Command D to deselect. Now that I've made that a little bigger, I'm going to move it over here again into the shadow space that we've prepared for it. And I can actually rotate it too if I want it to better fit. I think that looks fine. And now I'll click Done and Command D to deselect, or press the word deselect. The next thing that we'll do is learn to reposition a marquee while we are creating it. So for this one, I'm going to go up here to the top and click and hold on this marquee selection. Underneath it, you can see, as you click and hold, you can see you have rectangular, elliptical, and then single rows. We'll choose elliptical for this exercise. Now, I'm going to click and drag this over the plate of shells here, and you can see that I'm not kind of getting it exactly right. So, or I can hold down the spacebar key and move the selection itself around. Then I'll let go of the spacebar and continue to, with my mouse, reshape the selection. And so now I have a pretty good selection there. And now I've used my cursor keys on my keyboard to move it around a little more. And then in order to move the plate of shells to its place under letter C here in this shadow box, I'm going to hold down the Control key or Command key, Control key on a Windows PC, Command key on a Mac, and you could see the cursor changes to scissors. Now I can click and drag this plate of shells up here to where it belongs in the shadow box. And again, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to get it into the right place. If while you're doing any of this, something becomes accidentally deselected, oops, you can choose Select, Reselect, and it'll go back to that selection that you just had. And as you are using your arrow keys to move any of these selections around, if you press the Shift key and hold it while you hit the arrow keys, the selection will move by 10 pixels every time. Without the Shift key, it's 1 pixel every time. Now we've got the plate of shells where we want it. I'll choose Select, Deselect, and there we are. Press Command S to save. Now we'll get into using the Lasso tool to make a selection. To use the lasso, we'll come up here and click on the third tile down in the toolbar, and I'll select the lasso tool. We want to cut out this oyster shell here, so I'm going to zoom in so that we can see it. Hold down the Z key and click several times so that we can get to magnify the image so that we can see it well enough to make our selection. Now hold down the spacebar key and click and drag it up until I can see this clamshell. In order to use the lasso tool, it's exactly what it's named as. You click and throw a lasso around your object. So we can see where the arrow is here, and that's where the lasso will draw. If you ever want to get a very accurate pinpoint of where you're actually drawing at, sometimes the arrows and loops and things can be confusing. You can press down your caps lock key and your cursor will turn into a crosshair. And so as we come over here, we can carefully outline this shell by clicking and dragging along its edge. If we have a straight edge, for example, you can use the, oops, I made a mistake. I let go, so I'll just deselect and start again. I'll click and hold with my mouse and then slowly drag along this line as well as I can. Lasso tool, we carefully select around the edges as well as we can. Carefully select around the edges of this shell. Oh, it's not looking good. And we joined then our selection line to the other end, and now we have a closed loop. To subtract edges from a selection, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and you can see how the cursor got a little minus there. That means it's going to subtract from my selection. And so I'll come in here and try to fix this edge. I don't want to have to drag too far because it gets hard. Now I want to get this edge back in, so I'll press the Shift key and get a plus icon underneath my cursor. That's better. Press Option again for the minus. Okay, and again, I'll do that here. Option for the minus and kind of draw around our edge here. Contain all of that. Do a little more cleanup here on this edge. Okay. If we wanted to do a straight line with our lasso, we can also come up here to the lasso tool, click and hold for the polygonal lasso tool. Here, I'll just deselect. With the polygonal lasso tool, you can draw straight lines by holding down the Shift key. I can move my cursor anywhere, but I'm holding the Shift key down, so it's drawing a straight line. And that's how the polygonal lasso tool works. I'll press Escape to get out of there. So, for example, if I wanted to use it here, I could press down the Shift key, hold it, click my mouse, and draw that straight line. And if I'm kind of coming up and around the corners here, I just click and hold. Click, 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 click. And when we get back to our origin point, it'll turn into a circle, and that'll join the selection and make it live. That's not a very good selection. Command D to deselect. Now I'll come back to the selection tools, the lasso tools again, and go to the magnetic lasso tool. What this tool does is clings to the edge that it finds. So you can see as I'm dragging, not extremely carefully over the edge here, but somewhat. The lasso, the magnetic lasso, is magnetized. It's sticking to the edge of this object as I drag around it. You can see how it's not exactly perfect. If I went a little slower, it would have a better chance to do its thing. Now, my magnetic lasso has done pretty well, except for over here on the end. I'll press Command plus plus a couple of more times, hold down my space bar, and drag this over here where I can see it. I'm going to use the regular lasso tool by holding this down and choosing lasso tool. Now I'm going to press Shift to get the plus sign, so I add to the selection and just carefully drag it around here. There we go. It looks pretty good, except some of these edges are a little jaggy, right? Little harsh. Here in the contextual menu bar, which if it's not showing, you can come up to Window and choose Contextual Taskbar and click on this brush icon here. These will be your selection options. And in this case, I want to choose Smooth Selection. I'll make it 4 pixels radius to start. And just watch this bottom edge here. It smooths out the selection. It smooths out this curve along the top. It smooths it out along the bottom. If I wanted to expand the selection, I could make it open up away from this muscle here. You see how it jumped away from the edge. I can contract the selection. Let's go with 4 this time. And now it's inside of that edge. So I don't want either of those things. So I'm just going to press Command Z a couple of times to get back to where I started at. Now I'm going to zoom out a couple of times, Command minus, minus, minus. And we have to rotate this shell vertically. I'm going to use the transform tool to rotate this item. So I'll take my cursor up to the top and choose Edit, Transform, Rotate. And now you see I get this box drawn around the shell. And when I drag my cursor outside of it onto a corner, I get the rotation handle. And now I've rotated that shell. It's even giving me the degrees, right? 90 degrees is straight up, close enough. And now I can take that and drag it up here. Once again, I want to make it a little bit bigger. The transform box is still on. This time I'll come up here to width and height. This chain means that the proportions are constrained. They'll stay the same. Let's just make it 102 pixels. You can see that the same change I made in the width was reflected in the height. I'll click return to capture that and then done. Now I've completed the transformation and I can click deselect. Command S to save. Now we've got this Nautilus shell we want to move, and let's try that magnetic lasso again. I'll press Command plus plus to zoom in, plus spacebar, and hold it down to drag this Nautilus shell up here where I can see it. Then I come up here to the toolbar, and we'll select the magnetic lasso tool again. And what the magnetic lasso tool is actually doing is selecting areas of contrast. What we can do then is just sort of click and carefully drag this along the edge here. And as we drag relatively carefully, the magnetic lasso tool grabs the edges of the shell. Sometimes it might get something wrong, right? Oh, we don't want those. So we could delete the spots and go back to the last one. Every time we press the delete key, it'll go back to the last dot. If we need to place a dot of our own, we can just click the mouse and just kind of carefully drag around the edge, but not as carefully as you have to with the lasso. Click the mouse every once in a while if you want it to turn a corner, or if it's an area of low contrast, to make sure you're getting what you need. And the circle is there. That means I've completed my selection. There we are. I'll go up to View and Fit on Screen, which is also Command 0 on your keyboard. You can see now I've got the Nautilus shell here. I'll select the Move tool again and drag this up to its place in the shadow box. Very nice. Command D to deselect and Command S to save. Sometimes you might want to start from a center point, like in this screw here. Let's zoom in some more again. Spacebar to get the hand and drag it over. So in the case of this screw, I want to select from the center point. I'll go over to the toolbar and choose the elliptical marquee again. And come and place my cursor in about the center of the screw. I'm going to press the caps lock button again, and I place my cursor approximately in the center of the screw. Now, as I click and begin dragging, I'm going to hold down the Option key on my Mac And you can see that I'm clicking and dragging with my mouse cursor, and it draws the circle from my starting point is the center. Right? Turn it over. That's the center of my circle is where it's creating this elliptical marquee from. Now I've got the shape I want. I can release the mouse, kind of reposition a tick so that I can get it more like I want. Good. Now that I've selected the screw, I want to press Command 0 to fit everything on the screen again. And I'll select the Move tool over here in the toolbar. And the cursor becomes a arrow with a pair of scissors on it. That means it's going to cut it from where it's at and move it somewhere else. So I'll drag this over here onto this corner. Much too big. So we'll use the Transform tool again. Edit, Transform, and Scale this time. Here, the width and height are the scale or size. And in this case, I'm going to come up here and choose to hold down the Shift key and use my arrow keys on my keyboard to reduce the width by 10% at a pop. 50%. The chain is selected, so both width and height have been reduced to 50%. Now I'll click Done and deselect, and that looks pretty nice. Now that I have it, the size and the position that I want, I'm going to duplicate this screw a few more times to put it in the other 3 corners of the frame here. So I'll hold down the Option key or the Alt key on a PC, and I'll drag that screw up here. See, I've made a duplicate of it. All right. And now I'm going to press the Option and the Shift key. And as I do this, this is another straight line movement. It'll either move it 45 degrees or 90 degrees as we drag it down. So, right, if I hold the Option key, only the Option key, I move the screw anywhere. Command Z to take that back. If I hold the Shift and Option key, I'm dragging a duplicate straight down. See, the Smart Guide is helping us to line up with the top of the screw on the other side. And that's nice. And for my artistic sense here, I want to kind of move some of these I want to move this screw top so it looks as if it's turned a little bit. Deselect. I think that looks okay. Now I'll choose File, Save again. File, Save. Command S. Or Control S on a PC. Now that we've placed everything into our shadow box frame collage and put the screws in, we want to crop this so that all that we have now is the frame. To do this, we can use the crop tool. That is usually the 5th tool down. You can use the C key on your keyboard, as in crop, to select it. And it looks like these 2 L shapes. After I click the crop tool, you can see the crop marks show up on my work here, and I can just drag them in by hand, or I can set parameters up here in these tool options. So I'll choose ratio, and I'll make sure that delete cropped pixels is checked. Got my handles here and here. I'll drag these in a little bit. Good. And then this way, maybe a little closer here, a little closer here. Great. Now I can choose Done. And I've cropped out everything that I didn't want in my shadow box frame. I'll press Command S to save again. Command 0 to bring it all up on my screen. And we have finished lesson 3. And we have finished lesson 3. Now that we've finished it, I want to save it as a PDF and submit it on Blackboard. So back in Photoshop, I'll choose File, Save As, 03 Working Parker. Good name, tells me what it is and tells me who is submitting it. Here under Format, I'll click on it and roll down to Photoshop PDF. The extension on the file name changes to PDF, and I'll click Save. Okay there. All of that's fine. I'll change Acrobat compatibility up to Acrobat 9, save PDF. By moving up the compatibility, that reduces the file size and makes it easier to upload to Blackboard. This is fine. I'll click yes. And there we are. I now have this document as a PDF on my desktop right here. There it is. And now that I have this saved as a PDF to my desktop, I can go back to our raster class in Blackboard, click on this assignment, this exercise, and submit it there. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm japarker@atlantatech.edu. And thanks for listening.